Hello, Tansei. On behalf of Edmonton YWCA staff and board of directors, I want to warmly welcome you to our speakers panel today on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. My name is Catherine O'Neill and I am the CEO for YWCA Edmonton. And before I begin, I really want to respectfully acknowledge that YWCA Edmonton is located on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional gathering place for diverse indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose influence, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. YWCA Edmonton has been proudly serving and empowering women and girls in our community since 1907. Through world wars, the Spanish influenza, the Great Depression, and many other world events, we've always been there with a helping hand. So COVID-19 has been no different. We're hard at work helping women and families in our community get through this crisis and ensure important women's voices at our every important decision table along the way. Sorry. Today's discussion is an important part of our ongoing Power Lunch speaker series during the pandemic. While we may not be able to gather in person, it's important now more than ever to come together and host powerful conversations that spotlight amazing women doing incredible things to make our world a better place. Our panel today will talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, lived experience, and ways we can all confront and end violence and inequity waged against Indigenous women and girls. It's simply unacceptable that Indigenous women and girls in our country face higher rates of violence than non-Indigenous women and girls. We all have a role to play to stop this injustice. There will be a Q&A portion at the end of this event for your questions, and the conversation will be moderated by Brandi Morin, an award-winning journalist and Indigenous rights activist from Stony Plain, Alberta. We have posted her full bio in the chat function. I cannot thank Brandi enough for her support and help in organizing this. She inspires me so much. As a former journalist, she has contributed to incredible publications around the world, so I hope you can go and look them up. We are so lucky to have her in our country as an important voice for women and Indigenous rights. While today's event is free, I hope you consider donating to two organizations in Alberta that support Indigenous women: the Awadon Healing Lodge Society in Calgary, and the Institute for the Advancement for Aboriginal Women. We have posted a link in our chat function, so please check it out and support these two incredible organizations. So with that, I now want to begin this very important conversation. Brandi, over to you.
Taniki, Tansei, everybody, thank you for joining us this lunch hour for this very important discussion. I'm going to start by introducing our panelist guests today. So we have Josie Nepanek. Josie, if you just want to give a wave. She is she's Anishinaabe from Treaty 4. She is the executive director of Awadon Healing Lodge Society out of Calgary. Josie's background includes 28 years steeped in complex social issues, working with Indigenous organizations and advocacy for Indigenous women and families affected by family violence. She testified at the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Inquiry in May 2008 on the matter of service organizations as the only urban Indigenous women's shelter in Alberta. She's also a board member on many organizations and advisory boards, including being the chair of the newly formed Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Community out of Calgary. So that is Josie. We're going to go next to Nahanni. Nahanni, if you want to give everybody a wave. Nahanni Fontaine is the NDP MLA for the St. John's constituency in Manitoba. She serves as the NDP House Leader and Critic for Justice and Status of Women. Nahani provides workshops and presentations in the historical and contemporary context of Indigenous women and girls, including the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. She is status Ojibwe from the Sega, is it Sagin? Is that how you pronounce it? Yes. Sagin Anishinaabe First Nation in southern Manitoba. And she's a proud mother of Jonah and, how do you pronounce your son's name?
Nijanis.
Nijanis.
Child in Ojibwe.
That's beautiful, Nijanis. And then we have Stephanie Harp in the red there, the beautiful, beautiful red. So Stephanie is the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women. Some of her work at that organization includes hosting their Murdered, Missing, and Exploited Indigenous People Support Group, as well as being their national representative for AboriginalAlert.ca, which she will be speaking to later on in this panel. Stephanie's life experiences have shaped her humanitarian work. She herself is a survivor of the residential school system and survived an attempted murder attack. She is a proud daughter of a murdered mother, Ruby Ann McDonald. And she's also the niece of Historical Chief Dorothy McDonald of Fort McKay First Nations. And she has traveled extensively across Canada and the world advocating, as well as being a gifted singer and songwriter. So that is our panelists today, our incredible panelists. I'm going to start off by sharing a video. Oh, it says that my screen sharing is disabled, that the host disabled the participant screen sharing. Just wondering if that's still available.
As we work out this
good.
technical.
Here we go. Fixed. Great. So the first video I'm going to share, I believe that it was done by Awutan, was it? Josie?
Yes, right. Yes.
Okay, great. And this is Josies Story. I'm just going to turn the volume up. Oh, did I stop the share? Sorry, guys.
She loved to laugh, loved her family.
I'm just going to back that up 2 seconds here. There we go.
My aunt was an amazing woman. She loved to laugh, loved her family, and was always kind and considerate to others. She was someone I looked up to and admired her strength and her courage. She was a victim of the residential schools, as her life was shaped by those early experiences. She was a huge comfort for me, as she often looked after me as a young child. In her later years, she lived in the city, Winnipeg. She became a mother of 2 beautiful little girls. She loved being a mother. It's about this time her life took a huge turn. I believe this was the result of the trauma and grief she suffered in the residential schools. During this time, I was often asked by my grandmother to look for her, to find her, to make sure she was okay. I would go in and out of the bars on Main Street. One time when I found her, I remember her saying, "You don't belong here. You need to go and live a better life." I witnessed her trauma, which led to her making choices that were not always the best, but ones that perhaps allowed her to forget the pain for a while. My aunt's 2 children were apprehended by Children's Services and placed with family. She died when she was 27 years old, murdered, and no one was ever held responsible. She said something to me the last time I talked with her. She was in the kitchen making tea. I can't remember the entire conversation, but I will never forget when she looked at me in the eyes and said, "Don't end up like me. I want you to live a good life." At the end of our talk, she gave me a ring. It was one of those silly mood rings, and I lost it. But I will never forget the last words she said to me. If I would have known that would be the last time I would talk to my aunt, I would have hugged her and told her how much I loved her. I would have told her her 2 little girls would be okay. I would look after them like she looked after me. Over the 44 years since the last conversation, I have fulfilled my aunt's desire of not living like she did, but I am doing it for her children, her grandchildren, the ones that she had never been able to hold. I am now a voice for my family and my community who have been silenced by oppression. I still honor my aunt every year in the Sisters in Spirit Walk, along with the hundreds of families who have faced the same trauma. Seeing them standing together makes me feel hope. Some days the grief is still so very strong. It throws you against the wall. Other days I am strong. Each day as our voices get louder, I can feel our community reclaiming their power and place, and it makes me stronger.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a beautiful, beautiful video. So Josie, I have a couple of questions here to start off with you, just to let everybody know that the panelists and I had some conversations beforehand about ideas that they would like to address in this information session. So that is set out. But I just wanted to ask you something based on that video, Josie, that we just watched. To you, as an Indigenous woman and as a family member of a woman that was murdered, what does reclaiming power and place mean to you?
Well, thank you for the question. I just often have to shake off what I feel after I watch that video. Reclaiming power and place is really about reclaiming the ancestral voices of our grandmothers, who have, in many ways, have prepared us, I guess, for lack of better words, to deal with what's happened to our family members, and reclaiming that voice and bringing it forward, because that voice has the ancient wisdom to bring peace. It brings the wisdom to bring the healing and brings ceremony as well with that place to begin to work with our healing methods in our communities. And so when I look at reclaiming power and place in the context of my aunt, it's also about passing on that wisdom and that knowledge to my nieces who have lost their mother, who grew up without their mother. And so reclaiming their place as women in the community who are very strong, who have lots and lots of individual power to truly make a difference. And so reclaiming power in place is about two things. One is, you know, that ancestral grandmother voice, but shaped by contemporary but yet historical experiences as well. So blending the two, but coming to a balance between those two areas as well.
Beautiful, thank you. So I want to talk about genocide. Now, this is something that was important to you to bring
Yes.
up. We know that when the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls was released, they called this crisis a genocide. And a lot of people had a hard time with it. Many Canadians or powers that be did not want to accept or take responsibility for what is the most horrific crime that can be committed against humanity in the world, genocide. So why was it important for you to address this today?
Well, genocide has happened since contact, and it continues to happen to today. And genocide continues to result in colonial violence against Indigenous women, as well as the mass killings. I mean, we have, public record tells us more than 1,200 missing and murdered women, but we know from the ground that there are thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and there are thousands of children as well who have never been validated. And it also includes another example is the forced sterilization of Indigenous women. That's genocide. The forced removing of children from their traditional homes into homes of other people where they would, where children were badly abused. The residential schools, the 60s scoop, the child welfare systems are all acts of genocide. And it is a mass destruction.
So why do you think it's important that it's acknowledged? How does that benefit?
Well, it's really about education. We need to educate all Canadians that genocide happened, that it occurs, that it belongs, that this term genocide, which is fairly new and people get anxious about it, is unless we acknowledge it, then we're going to continue to deny that this happened to Indigenous people in Canada. So talking about it and understanding it is from within the Indigenous experience to both the historical and both to today, with what happens today, is very critical to finding solutions and to moving forward and to having that general education. Because people are educated, then the more folks are more determined to act on these issues and to create safe societies for all people.
Thank you. Now, Nahani, so I understand, I know in the report, the RCMP were named as being complacent to this genocide. I know, Nahani, that you've been working and advocating for this issue for many years now. And I'm wondering, we've had previous conversations, but I'm wondering what your experience has been with the police in regards to their interactions with families, and whether things are improving when they are on cases of missing or murdered women. What has your experience been?
So let me begin by saying, policing institutions within their totality. So it's not only the RCMP, it is all of the municipal policing agencies across the country from coast to coast to coast, that when you speak with families and when you work with families for so long, there's a pattern. And the pattern that you hear is families will often say, I called, police department X, and I was told, well, she's just on a drunk, or, you know what, she just needs a break, or, she'll show up, give her a couple of days. That in the 21 years that I've been advocating and fighting for MMIWG, to us, that is consistent. No matter where you go across the country, families have been very consistent in that first initial response when families go to policing institutions, that is within their right to go to policing institutions to say, hey, you know, I haven't heard from my mom, or I haven't heard from my sister, or I haven't heard from my lover, and you need to do something about it. And so that has been ongoing. And in fact, you can go even further, that when we look at the very establishment of the RCMP, the establishment, the principle of the RCMP was to support Western settlements. It was to subjugate and oppress and keep settlers safe from Indigenous peoples. And so that's a part of our history. And so you can imagine then the violence that is perpetrated against Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited from those first moments of contact until this very second. Indigenous women have always been constructed as less than, as not valuable, as unworthy of state resources that non-Indigenous women almost immediately get. And so that's been longstanding for many, many years, for many generations. What we've seen in the last, I would say maybe the last 10 years, is we've seen recognition from different policing institutions that they failed utterly in giving justice or attention or investigation to particular Indigenous women and girls that were brought forward. And I can name off a whole bunch, but we don't have a lot of time. But a really good example is Robert Pickton. So Robert Pickton is one of Canada's most prolific serial killers. For years and years, families and women in the community went to policing institutions and saying, look, they went to Surrey, they went to Vancouver City Police, they say something's going on. But because our people are not taken seriously and because our women's voices are not valued, those were just dismissed. And so you have one of Canada's most prolific serial killers that went with impunity and slaughtered our women. So that's just one example. And what you see is policing institutions recognizing how they failed. If you read the Opal inquiry into missing and murdered women in BC, what you'll see is Commissioner Opal says, you know, sometimes the families would go to the RCMP in Surrey, but they wouldn't connect it to the RCMP in wherever, in Richmond or wherever it was. And so you'd have complete disconnect. And you see that across the country. And so, you know, we know that the RCMP in Surrey apologized. We know just a couple of years ago, Brenda Lucky apologized that the RCMP have failed MMIWG families. However, let me just preface that by saying only a couple of months ago, the commissioner of the RCMP, Brenda Lucky, also said that there was no systemic racism within the RCMP. So you make a couple of steps forward and great leaps back when we don't acknowledge systemic racism and all of these things.
Right. Thank you. Now, Stephanie, systemic racism is something that you wanted to address in all standing systems and structures. You said that, you know, they need to be torn down and rebuilt and have all communities involved so that it can have new life and a real chance of success. Tell us more about how systemic racism plays a role in this and what can be done.
Well, you just said it. It needs to be torn down and rebuilt, but they need to have more people, the community, you know, nothing about us without us, you know, at any level, So right now there are people that want change. You know, we're seeing with everything going on in this world, even though it's going this way, people want change, right? And so unfortunately though, you know, we don't see a lot of that happening. We see these small steps and these small changes, but nothing drastic where it can be done. And the reason why it's not being done is because there's profit in each one of our sufferings. And that is the truth, all around universal truth for all peoples everywhere. And, you know, so that's what's going on. And then when you have an overpopulated world, mental health is an issue. So we have some leaders that are not well in wellness, that are not lived experience or been through it, they studied it, that's fine, but you need lived experience people.
Yes.
And we are at such high demand right now. It's incredible. I've never been so busy.
You mean for lived experience such as yourself, like people in high demand for helping?
For helping and giving some insight, because when we've lived it, we've been through it, we see through all lenses, right? And there's some lenses they're not seeing through. So that is a major problem. And now the other major problem is that we have non-Indigenous people in Indigenous titled roles that certainly affect our people of this country, and that is wrong. That is wrong. So we need these people like, Rochelle Venn is carrying on the legacy of Muriel Stanley Venn, right? So we need Rochelle Venn, Beverly Jacobs, Patty Labacan, Nahani Fontaine. We need all these women, Josie. We need all these women to higher levels of government where the decision-making power really is. And that's what's going to make a change for this country in and out and all systems, because each one of our suffering, every time we go to jail, that's money. Every time a child is taken away, that's money. Every time, we're traumatized and we stay down, that's where they want us. We can't allow that anymore. But you have to remember, we are getting educated. We are getting powerful. We are affecting the world. Everyone's hearing us, and we are fully capable of taking on these jobs and making these changes. So you need to come to the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women. Go to Native Women's Association. Go to Senator Murray Sinclair's office. Go to all these people, Beverly Jacobs. Go to them and talk to Awadan and get the real ways of getting this done. It's ridiculous that they are not included or elevated in any of this truth and any of this genocide. And genocide, when we said genocide, we meant it. And we never got an outcry from Canada. I really was waiting for that, and nothing. So that speaks volumes, and that's where I'll leave it.
Yes. So having Indigenous peoples at the main table is a power for real change. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and have Indigenous people in their proper Indigenous titled roles from the top to the bottom.
Yes. Now, Josie, just wondering if you have any thoughts on that, because I seen you nodding your head a lot, and also wanted to speak to you about the Death Review Committee. So if you wanted to respond to Stephanie, and then, you're on mute.
I just have to say I'm always motivated by Stephanie. I mean, her energy that she spews out is a wonderful, caring, and compassionate energy. So I really like that, and I resonate. I pick up on that, and I think, yes, right on. Let's do this.
Awesome.
Okay. Yes.
So can you tell us what the Death Review Committee is? This is an idea that you have as a possible solution to solving some of these cases. Is that right?
Well, there are death review committees across the country, and there are death review, across North America. And the whole purpose of the death review committees are to analyze what happened to the person who's been killed, of course, and also to tell a real story about this individual's life. And so this death review committee that I'm talking about would be an Indigenous MMIWG2S death review committee. There are many lessons to be learned. One of the things I think we would find out is who's been involved in this individual's life. You know, when I think about my own personal story and my aunt, I think about certainly colonization was a big part. The residential school was a huge part. There were also child welfare agencies. There were also foster care systems, and there were other pieces involved as well. So together, all these pieces that came together somehow pushed her further into the margins and subjugated her to these vulnerable kinds of places where some of the decisions that were made later had, as we know, detrimental effects. But we want to track agencies, who is involved. We want to spend time in the community of where this happened. If it happened in a small community, I think it's important that death review, however we call it, go spend time in that community and have a relationship with that individual's family, have tea, spend time with them, speak
And
the language,
what do you
ceremony.
think the outcomes would be of that?
Well, the outcome is that there would be a continuous monitoring happening in terms of MMIW, and it would increase accountability, because the more we know about these systems and who's been involved, who dropped the ball here. Was it the police? Then if that's the case, then we can hold them accountable. Was it the fact that there are no support systems in this community, or that she did not have access to those services and supports? Was she refused medical care? Was she did not have access to language, culture, and ceremony?
Right.
So it's about, I think, using the words of Dr. Peter Jaffrey, it's really about to recreate her experience through the eyes of the victim.
Right.
To tell the story.
In the hopes of coming up with answers, yes.
Hopes of coming up with answers and to prevent deaths. Because it'll tell us who's involved, what's involved, where, when, and through that data and that gathering of information, it'll strengthen the current initiatives and the recommendations that we have. Now, there are some Alberta has a death review committee, and I think if the structure is already there, then I think we need to move forward with a death review committee with respect to missing and murdered Indigenous women, or suspicious deaths of Indigenous women.
Right. No, that's really neat. That's the first time I had heard something like that when you initially shared that with me, and I think that's a really, great idea. Now, Nahani, you work in government, and I'm just wondering if you'd be able to provide some feedback on the government's role in helping to solve this crisis, both maybe on a provincial, and if you're comfortable speaking on a federal level as well. We know that the federal government has delayed a national action plan that was due in June of this year. It cited COVID-19 as getting in the way of finishing that, despite having 9 months prior to that to put something together. But what role does the provincial and federal governments play in helping to stop this crisis, Nahani, and where are they at?
Yeah, so let me be clear. Every level of government has a sacred responsibility to help mitigate the conditions in which Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited go missing or are murdered. And Josie spoke about some of that, and as well, Stephanie spoke about, so lack of housing, access to health, all of those things that we know, being immersed in poverty, trauma, all of those things are the systems that contribute to our women, girls, and Two-Spirited being unsafe. And so the federal government, the provincial government, the municipal governments, First Nation governments, Métis governments, Inuit governments, everybody has a role. And I always talk about that it is a sacred responsibility. It's a sacred role to take care of your people and to deal with the issues that contribute to that. So every level of government has a responsibility. And what does that mean? So you can look at the National Inquiry. It's all laid out there. You can look at the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry. It's all laid out there. You can look at the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. It's all laid out there. The work has been done, and those are only just 3 reports. Several years back, we did a whole series of reports that talked about MMIWG. It was pages and pages and pages of research and reports that's been done. So we know what needs to be done. It's that governments don't prioritize Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited, because again, we go back to that narrative that Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited, they're not valued, they're not worthy, they're dispensable.
So Nahani, how do we change that narrative then from those systemic levels?
Yeah, and again, Indigenous women have been doing this work for generations now, and particularly in the last 20 years, that voice has been stronger and stronger, demanding that, we have access to all the things that everybody else has access to: education, access to healthcare, access to justice, access to jobs, all of those pieces. you know, when you're in government, and, you know, we're just in opposition, so I'm not in government per se, but I do see firsthand the abilities to make change, that when you're in those positions of power and privilege, if you have the political commitment and the will, you can make those changes right away. And so, you know, I also don't buy into the feds saying, well, you know, the National Action Plan has been delayed because of COVID. If you really wanted, you would have that National Action Plan already well underway. Don't forget, this is the same government that also said you only have 2 years to do the national inquiry, which I think was not enough time at whatsoever. So at the end of the day, you need to have political will, you need to have commitment, you need to have the dollars, and people can do it. And I just want to quickly just say one thing that Stephanie said. Stephanie talked about putting our people in those positions of power, those positions that can make and affect change. I think that that's so important, right? If our people are not represented, either in government departments or chief account, or not chief account, I mean women, but, you know, all levels of government, who is going to be our voice? Because if you look at it, the whole system, the Canadian system, our voices have been absent, and look at what's happened. So I absolutely agree with Stephanie. Our people need to get into those positions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have just a few minutes left of questions on the panel, and then we're going into some Q&As. So I'm going to take over here. I'm going to play about a 1.5 minute video and go from there. Oops.
Hi, my name is Samantha at the Alberton Healing Lodge Society.
Okay. It's on here, and hopefully I won't have an ad pop up that I will have to skip. Oh, no, that's not it. Stephanie, there it is. This is just a short video on Stephanie's and Ruby's story, Stephanie and her mother.
I was standing backstage before going to accept my award for the arts when a wonderful woman told me she knew my mother Ruby, then asked if I knew about her being a go-go dancer for the Alberta bands. I felt shock, excitement, then a beautiful connection to my childhood, filled with music, dance, and those looks of love from her beautiful brown eyes came rushing back, and in that moment, my life and love made sense. She and I had more in common than just trauma, the main reason she never shared her past. I know she is happy because I truly am, and she lives her dream through me, but she should be here. I was 21 when she was murdered. I have done the hard work of healing and still am. I share our story to keep our people safe, and now the world knows her name.
Thank you. That was beautiful, Stephanie. So just want to thank you, Stephanie, for doing the work that you do and for being fearless and feisty in you know, doing the justice work that you do, and you know, carrying on the powerful legacy of your mother. I know that you wanted to speak to the Aboriginal alert system. Now, this is, I think, a system that came online just a couple of years ago, right? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so Dan Martel and Rochelle Venn, they got together and they had some meetings, and this was something that a lot of people were demanding and wanted, and I just think that this is something that was really missing. And so aboriginalalert.ca is a national website for our missing peoples of Canada, our Indigenous peoples. Now we have you can go on there as a family member and put up your profile. And we also have resources on there that we are still trying to dig up. We have a lot of work still yet to do. The response is like wildfire. It's spreading everywhere, and I just need everyone to go there and to get it out and tell everyone you know. And you know, we want to get this fully off the ground, fully supported. Although this is a grassroots effort, again, the powers that be should be funding and fully supporting these initiatives. It is ridiculous that we don't get the proper funding, and that you know, we don't even have Indigenous people. We don't even have stats.
Yeah.
We don't even have stats. This is
Speaking
ridiculous.
of stats, Josie can speak to that. She, you know, wants to see a database established to help determine exact numbers. Josie.
Exactly. So again, a grassroots initiative that will do this again, when she should be fully supported and funded in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So please go to aboriginalalert.ca and spread that around and tell everybody. It's really important to Dan and Rochelle and myself and Josh and the team. And we need everything that we can.
Just for people that know who she's talking about, those are her colleagues at the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women.
Yes, yes.
Stephanie. So Josie, did you want to quickly speak to the database?
I'd just like to say one more thing. So Rochelle Venn and Josie from the Indigenous Women's Task Force have done the engagement on a national action plan on murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in Alberta. So please get a hold of Rochelle Venn, our Venn at
Is that anywhere online?
No, you have to go through Josie and through Rochelle Venn at the IAAW, the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women, and they will disperse as they safely and respectfully will be doing, because we have to be very, very surgically careful and caringly careful, because these are voices of the families, and that's what's important to IAAW, is that we are serving our women. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So quickly, Josie, speak quickly how a database would be, you know, how that would work.
Yeah, well, it certainly would be critical information to inform the work that we're doing, and to inform, you know, all the policy makers and all that kind of stuff. But I think more importantly, you know, no one knows how many missing and murdered Indigenous women there are in Alberta. We don't have those numbers, and I'm not sure anybody does anywhere in any province. So and that's a quick win. I think this is something that the government can implement right away, is to have someone do that, so that we know exactly what the numbers are, so that there is increased validation for families, because I'm hearing of families who have lost as early as 1965.
Wow.
To recently. So there is a huge gap in terms of the numbers and what the public record is saying. And it's just an opportunity to store that information in one area, and also to analyze and to influence at some point, you know, policies and legislation. So the numbers of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So because unless we know those numbers, then I think sometimes governments and even police don't believe us. You know, they don't believe. We say there's 4,000 women missing. We know that because our boots are on the ground. We are hearing the stories, but they say, well, no, it's not on the record. Why is it not on the record? And this is really about accountability and holding people to ensure that there are resources and supports and services for that work to happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Nahani, I know that you have been advocating for a national monument, and you helped to establish one of the first ever provincial monuments to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls at the Forks in Winnipeg. Can you tell us what why the national monument would be significant, why it's needed?
You know, it's in the same way that it was significant for Manitoba to have a monument that represented, you know, all of our relatives, all of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It was a way, first off, to give recognition to families. And it was a way to, you know, everybody, I know that all of us on this call will know, you know, the saying, you know, never forgotten, you know, like always loved, never forgotten. Like our loved ones were here. you know, one of our MMIWG family members here says, you know, I gave birth to my daughter. She was here. I loved her. I raised her. And so, you know, it was important that the monument in Manitoba give recognition to our families and to our loved ones that they were here. And so in the same way, you know, if Canada really truly is, in my mind, if Canada is really truly committed to the families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and to MMIWG, to us, then the very least that the government can do is provide a national monument that recognizes the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited who have had their lives taken from them. It's the very least that we can do, and I hope that people will take that seriously. And I know that I met probably about 8, 9 years ago with a federal MP at the time. It didn't go anywhere, but it's something, you know, that I will continue to advocate and fight for.
Well, thank you so much, ladies. This time has seemed to have flown by. We're going to take a couple of questions from audience members. So feel free to jump in to answer this question. So this one is from Anonymous. How can I, as a committed ally, help ensure Indigenous voices are at decision-making tables? Who would like to? Oh, Josie, you there?
Yeah, I like that question because I think there are many ways to be an ally and to be a very strong ally. And that is to, I think, self-monitoring your own and evaluate your own organization as to how accessible are you, and right to the governance level. Do you have Indigenous people on your board who are in decision-making processes? And do you also have policies that reflect service provide, I should say that over again, in terms of providing services to Indigenous women and children? What are your policies? Do you practice those policies? And you need to have staff that look like Indigenous people, because when I walk into an agency or if someone's walking into an emergency women's shelter, we need to see people that look like us, the dark hair, you know, and we have that shared experience. So I would say keep trying and connect yourself with the allies. Come to our events that we host, Sisters in Spirit, volunteer at an Indigenous organization. There are some courses you can take online through the U of A, which are free, Indigenous courses, and that is a tremendous educational tool. Spend time with Indigenous people, and don't call us our Indigenous women. Just call us Indigenous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I can just quickly jump in, Brandi.
Yeah.
So I echo and support everything that Josie just said. I think it's also really important that if you want to be an ally, the quickest way that you can be an ally as well is vote in people that are actually committed to everything that we spoke about, right?
Yes.
We talked about that change takes political will and commitment. Vote in the people that aren't just going to give lip service to MMIWG, to us, or to our peoples. Vote in people that will go to bat in the legislatures across Canada for our women, girls, and Two-Spirited.
Wow. Yes. Powerful.
Yeah, and I'd like to also add, please start your own community self-coalition of change. Anybody can do that, and especially the rural areas where we are severely targeted and they are undereducated. Go to those most targeted undereducated spaces and create that safe space and invite people who don't look like you. Go to the RCMP and tell them and ask them as a whole community, ask them, what are you doing for people that don't look like me, that don't look like him, that don't look like them, right? Go and hold these people, the government and the police and everyone accountable to properly do their jobs, protect and serve, write letters, do rallies, do a march, like make some noise. That's enough time of talk, okay? This is okay. That's okay too, because you want to educate, but action is the key to getting all of this work done and destructing and rebuilding everything but having a proper foundation laid between the people.
Like, we're talking about a genocide here. Can you imagine if we were living in the 1940s during World War II, having conversations about what we could do right then to stop this genocide if we had the power to do it? And right now we are living in a genocide, an ongoing genocide. So it is
Yes.
extremely urgent. We have another question here from Ashton Rayer. What, in your view, should be immediate actions with respect to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls? I can say like they should go and read the calls to justice from the report. What other immediate things can they do? I know Stephanie just alluded to a whole bunch of actions that they could take, but any other suggestions?
If I can just say that, you know, in all the years that I've been doing this work, I think that one of the most immediate things that you can do, that individuals can do, is support MMIWG2S families, right? Families, you know, deal with a myriad of things, and like, you know, Josie and Stephanie can attest to, you've got the hurt and the trauma, but a lot of our families also are compounded by systemic racism. So, you know, for us here in Manitoba, we have so many MMIWG2S families that live in absolute abject poverty and who are struggling just to get food, literally just food, right? Or to pay any bills. I say to people all the time that if you want to support MMIWG2S, support families. You know, reach out to people that are in the know. Reach out to Josie, reach out to Stephanie, reach out to Nahani, reach out to Bernadette Smith, my colleague also in MMIWG2S. Reach out and ask how you can support. If that's giving money, if that's a food hamper, if that's bus tickets, help families. That's immediate. And that's something that everybody can do.
Yeah. Perfect, thank you. This is from an anonymous attendee. As Nahani notes, there's been numerous reports, but how do we hold governments account to implement those recommendations beyond our commitment to voting for people who support them? Nahani or Josie, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say that governments need to care, all levels of government. For example, I mean, here in Alberta, we just had this bill, I think it's Bill 215, that was a private member's bill with respect to genocide, that the province of Alberta is recognizing all genocides in the world, but yet not recognizing the experiences of Indigenous people are genocide that's happening now. So, you know, we did a press release at a press conference, and there was just 6 of us. Why aren't people annoyed? Why isn't there rage? And that's where I think action needs to start. Is I put a call into my MLA, who's actually introduced the private members bill, and that was 3 weeks ago. I still haven't received a phone call back. So I think it's important to put pressure and to ask for that accountability for inclusion of Indigenous in every document that goes through legislation. And to talk about it, talk freely at your tables about these issues as well. Engage.
Yes.
Yeah, engage and hold media, government, and the justice system. Well, I can't say justice system because there is no justice for us. The legal system accountable and get action, just aggressive action.
Now, just one more question for all 3 of you, really quickly. This is from an anonymous attendee. Can you each recommend a book or resource for the audience to read to understand this issue more deeply?
Yeah, I can go first. I can say White Fragility, and I don't say that to insult anybody. It's about white. It's the book is called
I've heard of that
Fragility.
one. Yeah,
and it's really a book about because most of us are probably service providers or in a relationship where we're providing services. So it's really about checking yourself and monitoring your own privilege and how that would impact the service work that you do. It's a great book. It's an educational tool. But I would also say, if you don't have a lot of time to read, then read the executive summary of the MMIW inquiry report. It's still 71 pages, but educate yourself. Again, have face-to-face conversations, engage with community, and be present when situations happen, when there is injustices around these issues.
Thank you. Just one book, ladies.
Can I suggest So this is, if you want to read, of course, the National Inquiry, but this is also the Wally Opal Commission for BC. And he did such an extraordinary job, I have to say. He interwove the way that the justice system fails. He interwove all of the stories of women that were murdered from Robert Pickton.
Wow.
This is a whole series that I would suggest people pick up and read as well.
And that's called the Wally Opal Commission?
It's called Forsaken, the Report of Missing Women Commission of Inquiry, and that's the Wally Opal. It's all about Robert Pickton. It's the commission that they had.
Thank you. And Stephanie?
And I would suggest just go to iaaw.ca to our website, and also, you know, call our CEO for anything that you need. She's at many tables, wears many hats. Come to lived experience like myself. And we also have the second edition of the Rights Passage, just brand newly edited at the IAEW office. So please look that up as well. And we also have a bunch of others at the office that we can you know, give you as well.
Perfect. And I'm just going to recommend one quick book. It's called The Reconciliation Manifesto by Art Manuel. If you want to understand what's going on in this country on a deeper level that brings it to today, where many of the adversities that Indigenous people are you know, dealing with can be, it's a really great resource. So thank you, everybody. You know, I just felt like we didn't have enough time, but I felt like we did get a lot of good stuff out there anyway. So hi to everybody. Hi to the YWCA and Catherine, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, Brandi. And on behalf of YWCA Edmonton, our staff, our board of directors, I want to thank all of you, Nahani, Stephanie, Josie, Brandi. Your words today are so powerful. I hear your call to action so clearly. We all, everyone in our country has a role to play into making sure all of us matter, all of our voices matter, and there's so much work to be done. It's a start of a conversation for us, and I hope people at home who are listening, how can you enact change in your own community? And you've listened to all these resources. At the end of the conversation today, we're going to send an email out with all of the stuff that you've heard, with the books that you'd like to read, with all the contact information. Please let this be start of the very important change that we need in our country. So, and I want to thank you at home for listening today. It's an important conversation. An hour is not enough, but we hope that you've had a great, you know, if you're new to this and you did not know where to start, you're leaving today with a lot of great information. So again, thank you, ladies, and stay well and goodbye. So on behalf of YWCA Edmonton, goodbye.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hi, everybody. Love you, women. Love you, women.
Love you.
Keep up the amazing work.